FearScape Media Network, exploring the unknown, one podcast at a time.
Hey everybody, Stefan here. This episode is sponsored by the great folks over at Box Mountain. Box Mountain is a subscription box service that has my favorite sub-box yet, the Cryptid Crate. You see, Josh got one of these for his birthday, and I was super jealous because it was packed full of merchandise pertaining to cryptids. The box he received first was all about the Flatwoods Monster, which of course is one of our favorites. And it had a t-shirt, a book, a patch, mug, and some awesome stickers. So I checked out the price to get one for myself, and let me tell you, it is well worth the value. These make excellent gifts for yourself or even friends that are cryptid lovers as well. Now, if you use the coupon code FearScape, you will get 25% off the first month for any new subscription or 10% off individual purchases. So go ahead and head on over to fearscapepodcast.com/cryptidcrate now and get yourself one today.
Thank you for tuning in to FearScape Paranormal Podcast. We are on a journey to understand and to discover the phenomena that seems to exist all around the globe. We invite you to join us on this journey into the unknown.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another frightening and enlightening episode of FearScape Paranormal Podcast here on the FearScape Media Network. I am your host, Stefan Gerhardt, and I am joined, as always, by the man who wishes he was my identical twin, my co-host, Josh Rutledge. How are you today, sir?
I am doing spectacular. Now, I feel like...
You say spooktacular or spectacular?
Whichever. Spectre. I mean, if you want to think that maybe spectacular, I'm talking about spectacular. I don't know. You know, if I was your identical twin, we could have pulled all kinds of antics back in high school.
Oh man, and antics on our wives.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you could have gone off and gone and seen a movie, and I'd be like, I'll just hang with your wife for like an hour and watch, you know, whatever show you guys watch together. You know,
no Netflix and chill stuff though.
No, because I don't want you doing that to my wife. So, but yeah, I mean, just the basic stuff, you know, like, oh, you need a ride to the grocery store. Oh yeah, I can take you to the bank. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. So, all the fun stuff. So we have a really cool show tonight. We are getting spooky with a legend in the paranormal field. We are going to be getting spooky with Mr. Paul Eno. He has been paranormal adventuring for over 50 years. Him and his son Ben are a world famous team of father-son paranormal adventurers, broadcasters, authors, and lecturers that have combined experience of over 65 years in the field of the unexplained. They have investigated hundreds of cases all over the world. They've lectured all over America and Europe. They have their own Sunday destination radio show called Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. It is in its 14th year. It airs in Boston market, and the show, which was broadcast for 4.5 years on CBS radio in 4 U.S. cities, has an estimated 3 million listeners. I mean, this dude's been going since the 1970s, Josh. He beginning while he was studying for the priesthood, he had early mentors that included parapsychology pioneer Dr. Louisa Rhine, Father John Nicola, who was the technical advisor for The Exorcist, as well as friends with, of course, our favorite folks, Ed and Lorraine Warren of The Conjuring fame. So I mean, this dude has been around the block, and I am so freaking stumped to pick his brain.
A lot of good history going to come out tonight.
Oh my God. I mean, and we're looking, this is a type of guy that looks at all paranormal like we do. That it's all connected somehow into the bigger grand scheme of things. I mean, he is into ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, you name it. So
he is legend dairy.
I like dairy a lot, especially milk and cheese. That is like, why is that not a milk product? Why is it not called Legend Dairy? Like, that needs to be
I agree.
Instead of like Shamrock Farms and stuff like that, Legendary.
Or just, it could be an ice cream shop set up in a town that has some legends.
Yep, Legendary. All the ice creams are named after like urban legends. And
you got Mothman, Maracharno, Cherry, ice cream.
Gelato, whatever, yeah.
Right, whatever. So,
totally,
boom, there you go.
Totally down for that, man. You could even have the Jersey Devil delightful dessert.
You could, but it'd be a banana split, though.
That's okay, I need potassium. I get cramps at night.
It's not just made for you, JC. It's for everybody.
Well, I just want to share my homeopathic medicine.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. He's just excited because we're doing Cryptid of the Week this week. But anyways, so let's get moving on, Josh, because I want to get crack-a-lacking because I do want to get to Paul here. I keep wanting to say Brian Eno because that's a really cool musician, but this dude's even cooler. But anyways, we're going to get to that. But let's get to our first segment of the week, of course, which is Psychic Word of the Week.
And now, the Psychic Word of the Week.
Psychic Word of the Week comes from the Encyclopedic Psychic Dictionary by June G. Bletzer, PhD. Rest in peace, Honey Bear. So I flipped through the pages, Josh, and I landed on page 461. The phrase that grabbed my eyeballs was over at the bottom, and it said perfectness plane. Perfectness plane. So here's what it says. The seventh plane, perfectness, represents the highest conceivable spiritual attainment, indescribable in language, beyond human level and comprehension. On this plane, it is speculated that mankind will be free from the downward pole of materialistic desires and its karmic tie. Happiness experienced beyond one's strongest imagination, a plane of light so strong that mankind cannot perceive it in their present stage of evolution. Sorry, humans, y'all don't get to see it.
I wonder, it's interesting. Well, but no, there is none chakras though. So I was thinking maybe it was like it lined up with the seventh highest chakra, like the crown chakra, but there's actually 9 chakras.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of the other 7 plane or the other planes, so I'm really wanting to take a dig into that. I can think of like 20 things that it might be.
Well, but we know of at least 2 other planes, right?
Sure, the astral plane and our plane and airplane.
Well, there's the physical plane, right? So but I
mean,
know.
like I said, I could hypothesize what they are and say the dream plane and things like that, but I don't know. She had it highlighted, so I mean, I could always go check that out another time.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like nirvana. It's something that we attain to reach that we'll probably never reach. You know what I mean? But you still try to reach it.
Is it the would calling it heaven be too I don't know, normal?
Yeah, maybe, but heaven, according to Christian mythology,
I'm just talking about
we can go to heaven though. I mean, this says you don't get to go. It's too perfect. So I don't know. And before you say, oh well, you have to die before you go to heaven, Elijah didn't die. He just got took up.
Well, I read something the other day that that heaven is actually every day of your life, and that you don't have to die to get there. You just have to change who you are to experience it differently.
Josh, heaven is every day of my life with you.
Why, thank you. Mm-hmm. Don't let your wife hear that, because I don't want competition. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing our wives don't listen to the podcast. So
only when they're in the other room hearing us.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Were y'all just talking about Bigfoot?
Yeah. So now you're listening because it's on the other side of the wall. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you, Junji Bletzer. Perfectness plane. That's kind of a tricky one to say. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment, which is the Mandela effect.
Did you say mandala?
No, I said Mandela. The Mandela effect.
All right, so Josh, we've got the Mandela effect this week, and I've got two for you like I usually do, but they are of the same ilk, okay? They are based on the same person, and today we're going to be talking about famous pilot Charles Lindbergh.
Okay.
So the first one that I want to talk about is the one that is the biggest one, but it's really quick, and that is what happened to the Lindbergh baby. What is your memory of what happened to the Lindbergh baby?
It was taken and never found.
Exactly. That's exactly what my memory of it was. I asked some folks at work today, some of the older folks, especially because some of the younger folks were like, who's Charles Lindbergh? Is it a cheese guy? And I was like, no, that's Lindbergher. Cheese. Oh, God. But anyways, I did ask some people, and every single person said the baby was kidnapped and never found. This is incorrect. Indeed, the baby was found. In fact, the person that ransomed the Lindbergh baby eventually got to the point where he said, give me the money and I will show you where the remains of the baby are, because he had already killed the baby. He had killed the baby with a blow to the head and then buried the baby. And then the cops and Charles Lindbergh and them did indeed find the baby. And the man, let me see what his name is here, if it says it on here. Doesn't say it offhand without looking for it, but the man that did all this, that kidnapped and killed the baby, was killed in I forget what year, but via electric chair and everything for murdering the baby. The baby was indeed found. It was huge news, but in fact, not a single person that I talked to said that, yeah, the baby was found murdered. No, every single person said the baby was never found.
Well, what I meant to say was the baby was killed. Like, I didn't mean it as like it never got returned. I mean,
that's what everybody thinks, Josh. Everyone thinks, and that's what I thought too, was that it was this big mystery that never got solved. That it was this thing that the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped and never found because, whatever the case may be, the ransom never got paid or got paid, but he never delivered up. That's what I had always heard. And everyone I talked to today heard the same thing.
Yeah, I remember, and maybe this is, I don't know, but I remember researching the story back in high school and reading about, them finding the body half buried and
they probably did in the dimension you were from. But those of us that I spoke to that flipped dimensions, in our dimension, it did not. It just disappeared and no one ever found the baby. So here's the other one. So this is the other one with Charles Lindbergh, and this is something that blew my freaking mind. What do you recall that Charles Lindbergh is famous for?
Circumnavigating the globe, or was it flying across the country? I can't remember which.
Neither. You're close though. It was flying from New York to Europe.
Yeah.
He was known as the first pilot to cross the Atlantic in under 33 hours. Yeah. It was like, did it solo, the whole 9 yards. That, sir, is not true. In fact,
part of it?
Charles Lindbergh was the 82nd person to cross the Atlantic. 82nd person to cross the Atlantic. He was not the first person to do it solo. He was not the first person to cross it on one trip. He was not the first person to do it from New York to, I think Paris, wherever it was. He was not the first person to do all these different things. He was indeed the 82nd person. However, the thing that I was reading, this guy speculated, was that Lindbergh had a lot of connections. He lived in a bigger city. Most of the people that did it before him were kind of unknown folks. They weren't really big. It didn't make huge news, and news didn't travel like it does today. and that because of his connections and he already kind of had some fame and things like that, his story got picked up and no one ever refuted it, and so other papers picked it up and so on and so forth and blah 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 blah. But yeah, there's even a movement right now to fix history on Charles Lindbergh. So
real quick, he's famous for making the first solo non-stop
flight under 33 hours.
Other pilots had crossed the Atlantic before, but he was the first to do it in a lone non-stop flight. Other pilots had stopped along the way.
No, that's what he's famous for, but it's incorrect. Others had done it nonstop. Others had done it solo. Others had done it in under 33 hours. He was the 82nd person to do what he did. In fact, I can send you. I have a ton of articles. I have a ton of resources and everything that go over all of it. But it's quite fascinating and it blew my mind. And like I said, there is a pretty big movement to get that rewritten. That of course history is written by the winners, the popular narrative and things like that, and based off of what they can find. But yeah, I mean, there were people that were crossing the Atlantic solo something like almost like 15 years before he did it. They were doing it in older planes, like right after World War I, they were already flying across the Atlantic solo and things like that. So pretty interesting. So that's the Mandela effect. Again, this is either one of those things that's the Mandela effect, that's we remember it that way because that's the way it was in our dimension, or this is just one of those cases that a well-connected person got an article written about him and it traveled in that regards and no one ever refuted it because they weren't famous like he was.
Well, I was going to say, how much of this is even the first account and this account? How much of this is just, the educational system leaving things out?
For sure, yeah. The educational system does not do research. Like, they have their textbooks and they go off of those textbooks. A lot of times. Because they made. I don't know. Back when we took history and they talked about the Lindbergh baby, maybe they only talked about the baby being kidnapped and killed, but never actually talked about the fact that it was found. And there's a big freaking article on FBI.com that talks about it. So and they may have just talked about, again, they didn't want to freak us kids out by saying, oh yeah, a box of bones was found. Like, instead they just talked about the kidnapping and the things that slept. In fact, even movies, I remember a movie, like, it kind of ended before there was any resolution. In fact, Unsolved Mysteries, I think, was the same thing.
Yeah, because who wants to show a dead baby in the ground? Because that's great television. It is now because it's all true crime shit, but back then it would have been uncool to say it how the kids say it. Kids say it today.
But yeah, so very cool Mandela effect. If anybody else has any information on that, let us know. But Josh, let's go ahead and move on to our final segment before we get to Paul Eno, and that is Cryptid of the Week.
Hell yes! Hey y'all, it's the Jersey Devil. Hope y'all are ready to meet some of my friends.
Cryptid of the Week.
Okay, I wanted to say, because I'm going to be going on vacation. I'm actually going to New Jersey. It's my papa's birthday, and so I'm going to be taking a leave of absence for a minute or two. But I just want to say, Josh, I'm going to really miss you, Stefan. I'm going to be really, really, I'm not going to miss you very much, but I will miss the food that you bring me under the table.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, so this is a development because I thought the Jersey Devil's parents were mortal, but if his papa's birthday, I mean, what's going on there?
You don't need to understand the way the cryptids do the things that they do, Mr. Josh.
Okay, well, I will take you to the airport. Don't worry about it. So
he's got wings. He can fly.
He can fly. He's lazy. But Josh, what do we got this week for Cryptid of the Week, man? I'm pumped to see what you got to bring forward today, and I know JD's pumped, man.
So today we got the Hellhound.
Ooh, I do like Hellhounds, man, because I watch Supernatural, and Hellhounds were a big part of it.
So what's your earliest recollection of hellhounds in literature or movies or whatever the case may be?
Well, I remember hellhounds because they were there when I was born. You know, they were there, and they let me ride on one of them like a horse.
I think he was talking to me, JD. For me, hellhounds, the earliest recollection of hellhounds for me was the Robert Johnson story. I grew up around musicians and stuff, so they were always talking about the blues and him going to the crossroads and selling his soul to the devil. And that one night after one of his concerts, he kept telling everyone that the hellhounds were coming after him. And then he disappeared.
So my earliest recollection is the Hound of Baskervilles.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
Sherlock Holmes and all that jazz. So the Hellhound actually dates back to 1682. So it was likely there the night JD was born because it predates the birth of JD. Original story was located, original sighting happened in Kentucky.
Really?
But
I guess that's not surprising.
But it inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to write The Hound of Baskervilles. So it's interesting that it was a cryptid legend in Kentucky in the 1600s that inspired a British writer to.
Well, hell, it's even crazy to think that there were white people already in Kentucky by that point.
I mean, in 1492, Columbus sailed
he was
the ocean.
Spanish, you know. But I mean, I feel I don't know. I just assume it's English. You know what I mean? So.
I mean, it doesn't.
I don't know. I don't know. I should, because since I grew up in Kentucky, I should know the history of the state. But you just always think the early the 1600s and stuff were mostly Puritans on the coast. You know, is what you usually think of.
No, even my ancestry, according to the genealogy stuff I had. Now at the time, Kentucky wasn't Kentucky; it was part of Virginia.
Sure, yeah. Oh, but okay, that makes sense. Okay,
because Kentucky wasn't founded as a commonwealth until 1792.
Okay.
So, anyways, on to the Hellhound. So it also says that Fluffy from the Harry Potter films was modeled after Hellhound, even though Fluffy had
cool.
3 heads, but still.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So the so actually the first referenced hellhounds were in Greek mythology.
Well, I was like, are you counting Cerberus? I mean, is that...
Yeah, but this, I guess this says that the actual first sighting was in 1682. So before it was just old.
Okay, so it was just a
literature
myth at that point.
Yeah,
So it was just a cryptid that had never been seen. Okay.
So mythology, Greek mythology. Supernatural dogs of exceptional strength and size, often with matted black fur and red eyes. Interesting, all these things have red eyes. In legends, they are ushers of the afterlife and a symbol of impending death.
Well, they're ushers so that they can watch the show for free.
Well, also because they like being on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Some stories say a single sighting means death is near. Others say that 3 sightings seal your fate.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew that they were considered a death omen. So.
Yeah. Though they are known worldwide, British expert and researcher Nick Stone has collected almost 500 stories from the United Kingdom and other European countries, and most describe an evil beast, sometimes called the Black Shuck, but some paint them as protectors. In one story, a hellhound defended a young girl against the abuse of a religious leader in a village in Littleport, England. The beast died defending the girl, leaving its ghost to wander the countryside. Most people believe the hellhound is either a living feral canine or an imaginary foe. Both theories could be true, as seen in an episode of Mountain Monsters.
Yeah, or it could be a Colin Farrell monster.
Yeah, it could be. It's going to go streaking through the quad. That's Will Ferrell. Never mind. A Kentucky man allegedly caught a large dog-like creature 7 feet long on cell phone video. After seeing the video, the bearded cryptid hunters investigated the Pike County.
I think I've heard this story before.
Kentucky
and may have
Hellhound.
seen the video a long time ago.
So one of the things it says here is that these are probably wild or feral dogs, but I also wonder, talking about the size, if it's a wild or feral hog. Because they do get really big.
Yeah, they can get really big and dark.
Yeah, and they definitely have the matted fur, and they would have the kind of like tusks and things that you would associate with that kind of stuff. So
100%.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's the Hellhound. They've got a picture here of a Hellhound pup. It's cute as a Dickens.
You should have seen me when I was a little baby. I was so freaking cute.
I wonder, did JD's like wings? Were they at birth, or did you like develop?
Well, I was a baby, so I don't have a memory.
That's very true. Actually, they're all your memories are in there, JD. They just, you don't have the conscious will to pull them forward. So
You trying to tell me what I can and can't do?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go. I gotta get to New Jersey. I'm gonna start packing.
All right,
Don't forget your winter wear.
Yeah. All right. Well, Josh, thank you, man. Hellhound's one of my favorite creatures, especially because the Supernatural whole season was devoted to the Hellhounds. What a fantastic, and Robert Johnson lore. All those things are really, really great. So we're about to get to our interview with Paul Eno, but I do want to remind everyone that if you have not yet, please rate and review this show wherever you can rate and review. Apple Podcasts, places like that. Those are great places to review the show. You let us know that you review, we will send you a free sticker. That's a fact, Jack. But yeah, rate, review, and the biggest thing is to share the podcast and let the world know about
FearScape Paranormal Podcast with Josh and Stefan.
Anyways, so we're going to take a very quick break, but as soon as we get back, we are going to be getting spooky with Paul Eno.
Hi, do you enjoy diving into true crime
and tales of the paranormal?
Then join us. I'm Anna.
And I'm Lindsay on our podcast, Ghosts in the Attic, Bodies in the Basement,
a FearScape Media Network podcast.
New episodes air every other Friday on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Something dark is here, flying in the skies, lurking in the woodlands, swimming in the rivers, and hiding under your bed. Join me, Mark L. Watson, and FearScape Media as we delve into the paranormal, the occult, the spiritual, and the esoteric, and peer beyond the veil. Find us everywhere you get your podcasts or search for more information at fearscapemedia.com.
And thank you guys so much for sticking around. As promised, we have Paul Eno here. Thank you so much for coming on FearScape, man. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I over the last couple of months, I've been doing a little who have I friended on Facebook, and who are their friends, and how far can I trickle down the paranormal rabbit hole on Facebook and connect to people. And I think I linked to Kathleen Martin and came across your name and linked to you. And as soon as I did, I was like, who is this guy? And so I started looking at it, and my God, you have been in the realm for quite some time. What, over 50 years, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun, Josh. Yeah, and, I started in 1970.
Wow. And that's back, and I recently was listening to a book, and I can't remember for the life of me what the book name was, but it's actually been referenced in a couple of different books where people used to get parapsychology degrees, and that's, I guess, back in that same kind of vein of timeline where all of that kind of stuff was happening. I don't know that if you have one or not, but I just found that very interesting that people actually used to go to college for parapsychology type studies. And I'm also shocked that it doesn't ever happen anymore today. But
well, it's that was a strange time. I remember John F. Kennedy University in California was one of the few places to offer degrees in parapsychology. And Keith Harari and a few other fellows I knew actually obtained doctorates, although there's a heavy emphasis on psychology as well. I was, on the other hand, a student for the priesthood, starting in 1967, back when you could still enter the seminary at the age of 14. Wow. Not a good idea, emotionally or otherwise.
Hey, recovering Catholic here.
It took me 10 years to find that out. But in any case, I started to research the paranormal then, which was not something you were encouraged to do. You know, people think priests are trained in paranormal, and they're not. Very, very few are. As a matter of fact, there were a few who were handpicked to study the paranormal or their narrow view of it. And they end up diocesan exorcists, you know, all priests were very, you know, all hush-hush and everything. Right. And I worked with one or two over the years, and I quickly came to the conclusion that it's all wrong. Yeah, the theories aren't good enough. And as a matter of fact, leaving possession and all that sort of thing out of it, I came to the conclusion very early on that as is the subtitle of the book that my son and I wrote in 2016, everything you know is wrong. It's just you know, it's not, the stuff isn't good enough. You know, for example, if I can talk about my very first case, I was again a seminary student, and I talked to a couple of the other seminarians into coming with me, much to their surprise. And it was an old abandoned village in northeast Connecticut, a very rural, very quiet area. And from the minute we walked into the place, you know, a hot August afternoon, there were strange sounds, you know, the sounds of farm implements. There were no birds or anything, but you could hear dogs barking, people talking, as if it was a normal day for, you know, somebody else. And we were very systematic, or tried to be, with the technology of the time. And we would map the place, so there was literally no one around. About a quarter mile away was a 4-H camp with nobody in it. Other than that, we couldn't figure out where these sounds were coming from. And as the expedition has progressed, we found these cellar holes where the people had lived and this sort of thing. And we heard the laughter of children, and as the case progressed, we heard an ox cart, and this is that fall, the following expedition, proceeding down an area that had been a road about 150 years before this. And it sounded so real. There were 7 of us, we literally got out of the way. It was a Sunday. We figured maybe somebody is a team driver as a hobby or something.
Right.
And this thing went by about 20 feet from us, and we couldn't see it. We could hear a driver yelling, "Yah!" and the crack of a whip.
Wow.
The hooves, the wooden wheels, and we couldn't see it. And this really kind of nudged me into some serious doubt. I mean, are we dealing with dead people here? Are there ghosts, as it were, of ox carts and horses, things of this kind, or oxen? Were we dealing more with time than we were with death? And so the very first case launched me off on a sort of tangent, because, you know, I question everything. Like in the seminary, I was a real pain in the neck. I'd say things like, well, okay, the Bible says Christ was in the tomb for 3 days, right? But Friday evening to Sunday dawn is not 3 days. It's like a day and a half. So maybe he died on Wednesday. You know, it doesn't make any difference. But they'd say, oh, you know, I'd annoy everybody. Or I'd bring up the idea, well, the theology says that Christ was truly God and truly man. If he was truly man, he'd reproduce, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, you know, and the Eastern Church, where I ended up, is not fixated on the cervix like that. Yeah. But in the Western Church, the Catholics and Protestants, you know, those are fighting words.
Oh yeah, so, that was me getting in trouble with all my nun teachers when I was a kid. And
that's right.
Question.
It's out of church school, right?
Right. You know what happened the first 30 years of his life? You know, he just
exactly.
He was hanging out in Buddhist China, in India.
Well, who knows? You know, but and that brings up issues that came up as far as the human origins were concerned. And paranormal work will lead you into questions like that.
Yeah.
You have a 1.5 million years, maybe 2 million years of human history that is totally empty. You don't know anything about it.
Right.
Could be 1,000 civilizations could have risen and fallen in that time, and we know nothing about it. So these are all things that I was concerned about.
It's interesting. You mentioned the thing about hearing the buggy, the cart go down the road, and are there ghosts of carts and stuff? And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I've talked to Stefan about it a couple of times, is all these things that are I think people primarily break spirits up into two categories: residual and intelligent, right? So in the intelligent ones, they interact with you in some way, shape, or form, whereas the haunts that are just are residual, they're just repeating the same motions over and over again, almost like a snapshot in time. And I've wondered if those snapshots in time happened in various high I don't know the word to put it, but use when we dropped the atomic bomb, for example, was that a high history impactful moment for us as humans that it permanently locked whatever was happening in the world right then in that time? It locked it into some kind of residual time loop, and so then we're hearing cars and buggies and people passing through walls and whatever the case would be now, because it's again in a time loop because of that significant event that happened in our history.
Well, you could be entirely correct, but I haven't really believed in that sort of thing for the better part of half a century. Okay. Because of the various experiences that happened. Again, I could be all wrong. I'm open-minded to all possibility. But I was an early advocate of that residual theory, which originally, and very often today, is considered to be this approach, that an event, a traumatic event or whatever, or even a minor event can be, as it were, recorded on the environment somehow. But I took a look at that and I said, if this ox cart was recorded on the environment, I mean, what environment? I mean, the stone walls are the only things that haven't changed for the last century or two. The trees are different. The soil is different. You would have to have incredible amounts of iron oxide in the rocks just to even record sound, never mind any of the visual things we saw. These people showed no sign whatsoever of being dead. It could be a time loop, but I don't know about that because I have deliberately interacted with what was considered to be residual hauntings and changed them. Now, had I known then what I think I know now, and again, I could be wrong, I would have tried to interact with it. And I later found out that the Enos, doesn't sound like it from the name, but it's an old Connecticut Yankee family. And I found out that we're related to the people who lived in this village. One thing I never said for fear of being in more trouble than I already was in the seminary was that I knew some of these people. I knew them. When I heard those children laughing, I knew some of their names. And I was very, very strict about my Roman Catholic beliefs, and I rejected it. But I had a certainty, later. It took me years and years to accept that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, it seems some stuff for me growing up Roman Catholic. There was stuff that I had to accept years later.
So I'm going to tug at that thread a little bit. So are you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm wrong here, but are you thinking that because you had some sort of a familiar relationship to people who were living in that town in the past, that maybe allowed you to experience some sort of a time, auditory time travel, if you will, in the present?
Well, the 6 other people experienced it too, and they had nothing to do with these people.
Interesting.
Right? So,
and I'm sorry, my experiment problem-solving brain is going right now. So.
Yeah, by all means.
But no, I'm just trying to work out, what are the possibilities. I want to go to this town and do some experiments. I mean, that's just where I am. So,
well, people have done that, and with the electronic voice phenomenon, all that sort of thing. But I take that with a pillar of salt sometimes. You have, but my point was that especially being a relative of these people, I knew that guy in the ox cart was one of the Randall family. Okay. I don't know how, there's no logic to it. So had I known then, as I say, what I think I know now, I would have attempted to interact. And I think Mr. Randall who was simply going about his life in 1778 or something like that would have had a very interesting day. Now, later on, we had a fellow who came with us who was a total skeptic. That's why we brought him. He was not a seminary student. He was one of the early computer type people working at United Technologies in nearby East Hartford. And he had the weirdest experiences of all of us. And it was Halloween weekend. That was not planned that way. But we were going. There was an old cemetery that was up on the hill above where these houses were, and all overgrown with woods now, of course. But it was there, and that's where most of the people were buried who had lived in this village. So what we did was we mapped it and everything else, and it was at night, and we were going to stake out the cemetery for the umpteenth time. All sorts of interesting things had happened. So we went up. We had spotlights. We knew exactly where we were going. The cemetery was not there. It wasn't there. Now, we got to a certain point where Marcel, this is the guy, stopped. And he was in his 30s, which to us was pretty old. And he could not move. We literally tried to pull him. There were two other fellows. We tried to pull him forward and pull him to the left. And he was rooted to the spot as if it was an electrical charge going through him. You've heard of that phenomenon. On the other hand, he could move voluntarily to the right and to the back. Now, left and forward would have been where the cemetery should have been. All of a sudden, he began to sob, and he leaned over on his walking stick. And the first thing I thought, and he was having a heart attack or something. These are days long before cell phones or anything like that. So we were on our own. Might as well have been on the moon. So, but then he said, no, it was okay. It was cold to the touch, cold sweat. He felt as though something was stopping him and that we should not go to the cemetery that night. That's when we heard the muttering. Now, you can hear a group of men muttering, and it's in English, but you can't tell really what's being said. Well, that's what happened to us. No more than 20 feet away, there were a group of men in what would have been the cemetery. And I often thought in later years when I discovered quantum mechanics, again, if that applies here, I wonder if we were not the origin of the haunted stories that had been attached to this cemetery since the very beginning. They used to say that people would not go to this cemetery at night because of, quote, ghosts seen reclining in the branches of a certain elm tree, of which we have a photograph of one that we got on our first trip. So I'm wondering if, time loops or whatever you want to do, partially across the membrane in their world and then partially in ours. Maybe we were the first ghosts to haunt that cemetery before it was even there. And that's how the rumors began. Yeah, I mean, that's just a shot in the dark.
Oh, dude, I love that theory, and I've thought about it before. It reminds me, of course, of the movie The Others, where the whole movie, they think that they're being haunted, of course, and you find out they are the ghost. Like, what a great idea. And I've always wondered that too, especially if we look at dimensional flips. Time is a construct, right? We don't know. We have no idea. And then there's that idea. It's like, what if what you saw was yourself?
I mean, and I saw that movie, The Others, and I said, they're going to make it. They're going to get, and they blew it at the end. I know. But that's anyway, nevertheless. But I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities, spiritual, who knows what, social that can come out of the notion of parallel lives, parallel worlds, and this sort of thing. The all possible outcomes being out there somewhere. And I think that perhaps this case in Pomfret, Connecticut was, I think, my first experience of that. And then it got better from there.
I was going to say, that's one hell of a first experience.
Yeah. Great introduction.
Well, fellas, probably the worst, people ask me, what was the worst or scariest event you ever had? And there are several of them that rank up there. But probably the scariest things that can happen is when something just totally wrecks your belief system.
Yeah.
Because what do we have outside of our belief systems?
Right.
We're almost alone out there, and then that's what buoys us. And then when something happens that smashes it, that's really scary.
Well, and it's interesting, to see the people, when you have blown your own belief system years ago and you've kind of moved towards like I do. I always say, hey, if you want me out of your neighborhood, burn a question mark in my front yard. You know what I mean? Like that's me. I'm always constantly changing and looking into things, but seeing people that have been around me for years that slowly start sliding into my way of thinking and then having to be there for them as their belief system.
Yeah.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. You're on like, you're mile marker 136 and they're just, they're not even a mile 1 yet. So,
and the last thing you want to do is say, told you so, because that's not the right.
Oh, no. That's bad bedside manner.
So one of the things in we talk about it quite a bit on the show and have for a while. And something I think in looking at your material that I think you're along the same line is that somehow all of this stuff, Bigfoot, aliens, UFOs, ghosts, whatever, it's all somehow related to a bigger picture or a bigger phenomenon. Is that are you in that boat, or is that?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Okay. Well, by the end of the 70s, Josh, I was investigating your garden variety haunted house or whatever, and it just something told me, go on outside in the yard, don't just stay in the house. Talk to other people, excuse me, and talk to neighbors if you can. That's not always possible. They might think you're a fruitcake, but sometimes not. But when you do manage to push the envelope, as it were, in an investigation, you find all sorts of interesting things are going on. Neighbors are almost certainly having trouble in their homes. Okay, there are people who, in the case 1998, where the 3 households came out and said they'd seen UFOs on the property where all the interesting ghostly stuff was going on, parasitical, demonic, whatever you want to call it. And then, you start getting into cryptids being seen in the same area. Yep. And I went back to the ideas of John Keel and Jacques Vallée that I read as a kid. Yep. And these were window areas, that was one of the Keel's ideas. And by the early 2000s, when my son Ben joined me at the age of 13, after much discussion with his mom, we started our first what we call flap area case in central Connecticut that's still going on 16 years later. And you name it, it's and we always run into the military in these flap area cases. And I have a possible explanation for that. I have an idea. But so, yeah, definitely, I think these things are related because the processes behind them are the same. And we actually had to invent terms to just talk about these concepts because people weren't talking about it. Some when, else when, super life, facet, the intersect points, overwashes, the flashing nexus. And these are all things that, these are all things that came up that there weren't any words for, so we invented some.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's something we have been since Josh and I have known each other since high school, but since we started working the show, we immediately came together and shared that we both had that same idea of all these things being related. And so whenever we cover topics, a lot of times we will take a look. I mean, one thing one big one for us was the Enfield Poltergeist, that at the same time was a huge UFO flap and a number of Bigfoot sightings, all within like a 50-mile radius of the home there on Green Street. It's just absolutely fascinating. This whole thing happened over a year, and this huge flap of UFOs and cryptid sightings was happening too, and no one reported on it.
Yeah, and what's really crazy is everybody talks about the haunting, and then they'll talk about the UFO flap, or they'll talk about the Bigfoot sightings, but no one ever really talks about all of it holistically together and how it's all related.
Well, I think another example would be the Bridgeport Poltergeist case in Connecticut in 1974. And William J. Hall, I wrote about it in a couple of book chapters here and there, but William J. Hall was the first one to write an entire book about the thing. And I was there for the whole thing, and there was stuff that I didn't know that he found out. Unfortunately, it was so many years later, you had me and a bunch of 80-year-old retired cops as the only witnesses. And he didn't talk to Lorraine Warren, who was still alive at the time. But nevertheless, he really got in there. And I said to him when he interviewed me, find out if you can about the neighbors. Check MUFON files and see if there are was a spike in UFO sightings at the time, as early as that was. And sure enough, from what he could find, there were even Ed Warren would call them spillover phenomena. He didn't really get it, I think, as far as the multiverse and all that was concerned.
Yeah,
it was all demons and stuff. But Bill Hall really kind of dug it out, and had we known then what I think we know now, then we may have pushed the envelope of that case. But it was pretty wild anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been monkeying with over the last month or so is downloaded the files for all the New Fork sightings that's in their database up until 2020. All the Bigfoot Class A sightings. I've got a report download for all the Dogman sightings. But I'm basically trying to pull all these together. I'm loading them into Google Earth and then looking to see if there's any commonalities between where they're sighted, or I did some ley line overlays to see, is there any correlation? Are there a lot of intersect points of ley lines where this stuff is happening? So just kind of doing all the boring data stuff. But I mean, it's really interesting that, I'm doing that now with the technology that I have. You all were doing it then with,
not much. Yeah. Well, our high tech at the Pomfret and the Bridgeport case. I was home from the seminary on vacation. I was just going down to have dinner with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I didn't even know this was happening. And again, nobody had phones in their cars, and you didn't know till you got there. So I drive up to their house, which is at the end of a cul-de-sac, and Lorraine comes leaping out the door and says, "Are you in a high spiritual state right now?" And in fact, I was in a terrible spiritual state because I was trying to decide whether to leave the Roman Catholic Church and join the Orthodox Church and go to their seminary. So I said, naturally, "Oh yeah, I'm great. What's going on? Let's go." And so then we were down there for 3 days, and all the hell broke loose. But it was again, if it's funny the circumstances that come together to bring these things to fruition. But it was no Bigfoot sightings that I'm aware, because you're in the second largest city in Connecticut. It's probably not going to be stomping down Lindley Street.
Right.
But plenty of UFO sightings and things of that kind that occurred. And you look at the geotechnics of an area too. All these things are the ducks that are lined up, I think. So it's not just cryptids and UFOs. Mm-hmm. You have sandy soils, high water tables. Bridgeport is really right on the ocean or the Long Island Sound anyway. And so it's a matter of looking for patterns, as you've been doing, Josh, which I think is a terrific idea, and getting the data. One thing I might advise you to look for too, because we found it, is changes in public behavior. Now in central Connecticut, and we're still going through police reports for the last 16 years, there was an outbreak of people driving on the wrong side of the road. This is after the military was there. And people, because there were accidents. When that was noticed in the press and social media, it became people driving off the road and hitting trees in ludicrous numbers, statistically speaking, for the population of this area. And then when that was noticed, there was an outbreak of suicides. There was a very weird tower on top of Mohawk Mountain in this area. And there's your garden variety cell tower. Everybody knows what that is. And then this very strange thing. And, I had military experience, but, 100 years ago. So, we were practically still rowing boats. But anyway.
So where when you were talking about the people driving along the side of the road and people driving off hitting trees, people hitting suicides, what it sounded or reminded me of is the stuff that was happening in the town during the Montauk Project. I'm sure you're familiar with the Montauk Project.
Sure.
So,
I never worked on it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, so they were pointing this dish at the town, and these crime sprees were happening and all this kind of stuff. And then, so I'm thinking down that line of thinking when you're talking about this, and then you're like, and then there was a weird tower, and I'm like, oh, there you go. So,
well, central Connecticut is right across Long Island Sound from Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, whether that has anything to do with it, but around about 2009, and this is we call it the Litchfield Triangle. I mean, that's just a research area. You don't know where stuff ends and begins. The case has expanded to about 330 square miles at this point, and over into the Hudson Valley of New York. There were ground troop movements, and they didn't care who knew it. 2009 and 2010, they were centered around this farm. We've come to call it the Funny Farm, where there's no farming. And it was a bunch of broken down buildings. That has since been fixed up. All the buildings have been replaced. There's still no farming. Government type trucks are coming and going. We have one of our shows has a crazy producer who the full-time job is behavioral science, and she works in that area. She just walks right up the road when the gate goes up. You're going to get arrested or shot. Don't do that. But she's gotten some amazing photos, and we've got a lot of plans for that. And we did run into a radio expert, a civilian, who said that it happened to be at a lecture. And all of a sudden he said, you're talking about this farm in Connecticut. I installed all sorts of radio equipment there that has no business on a farm.
Sounds like
right across the road. Yeah, right across the road is a property owned by the U.S. Army with a very weird windowless building. But I can go on and on about this.
Yeah. But
the question is, why do we run into the military in every single flat area, and 6, including Rendlesham Forest in England, that we've been investigating?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was going to say it's interesting because since I've been here, a lot of the things that people say to me since I've moved to Phoenix is, have you seen people driving on the wrong side of the highway yet? And I will tell you, I've been here since October. I've seen it 3 times. And everyone says it's so weird. There's always somebody's driving on the wrong side of the highway. Phoenix is already kind of a weird spot, but now you got me thinking. I'm like, what else do I need to be looking up?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to remember that when I'm renting a car out of Sky Harbor.
Yeah, watch out. I've seen it 3 times, mostly at night, and you can see it come in and things like that. And they're all the way over because they know, oh shit, I'm on the wrong side of the highway.
My mother would do that, but she was kind of a character. So.
Well, I mean, when we were there, my wife and I, just like a month or so ago, I don't know, time's weird, but anyways, and we got an alert on the Google Maps navigation thing. Watch out, car on the wrong side of the road ahead. So
apparently it's a phenomenon here in Phoenix.
Which I always, I can understand if you're on ramp and you're off ramp for, is like right next to each other, but most of the places out there it's not, and so it's just
like anywhere else.
Paying attention, I guess. But yeah. So talking a little bit, and I'm going to ask the question: What are your thoughts on the whole DUMB underground base stuff?
Well, underground bases are not that rare at all. And maybe it's underground base. It's like saying conspiracy theory. I mean, history is full of conspiracies that were real.
Right.
And underground bases are not unusual at all in the military world. I worked on 1 or 2 of them, and I was in. Well, it was stuff I couldn't talk about, and then later on I was in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I love cats. I see the cat here.
He jumped up here. But, he's like, "Oh, we're talking about dumb things."
Yeah. So I don't really know. I think that there is evidence of underground ventilation on this Funny Farm I mentioned in Connecticut. Yeah. The question is why. I think that people would be fine with aliens out from some other planet. We all grew up with Mr. Spock, and the Planet of the Apes, and Chewbacca, and all these guys. I don't think anybody had any problem with that. But if this if this multiverse thing is true, then they're not far away. You could say that our greatest nightmares and our most wonderful memories and hopes and dreams are right next to us all the time. I think that could be what they're trying to hide, because I don't think people could deal with that. They wouldn't understand it, and if they did, they'd probably be terrified of it, and in some cases, rightly so. Think of don't underestimate the industrial possibilities and the commercial possibilities. Everything comes down to money.
Yeah.
I don't care. Countries say they're communist, and it's all baloney. It's all about money, no matter what your system is or who you are. unless you have spiritual advancement yourself, but that's another thing. So, I mean, I think that there are really possibilities for, wouldn't we love, first of all, to weaponize the paranormal and the principles involved? Wouldn't we love to commercialize the paranormal? Imagine, eliminating trucks and trains and being able to transport huge amounts of cargo through some sort of membrane where it's already there, and then the consciousness. It's just possibilities are endless. So I think that may be the reason for any underground bases or whatever is happening. Then, of course, people are talking about aliens and this sort of thing cooperating. Well, what does alien mean? Is it necessarily from some other planet? Are they what they appear to be? Are they good? Would they treat us as equals? There are all sorts of questions there. And then Stanton Friedman has put it best. Today would have been his 87th birthday.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yeah. Wonderful, real gentleman and a true scientist. He said, we are a primitive species whose primary activity is tribal warfare. Why would they want to talk to us?
Yep.
So yes.
Well, and honestly, that's we typically, our response to unusual things has not been good historically. So, given our warring nature, so to speak, anything that kind of being spun today as the potential threat, we would likely either attack or seek to basically control. So,
I think that's largely correct. I think sure.
Yeah, and it's like you had said earlier. It's like aliens. Yeah, I think we're all prepped for that. I mean, just like I said, we've had years and years of sci-fi movies getting us ready for that, and there's not as many sci-fi movies out there that deal with ultra-terrestrials or multi-dimensional or even shaver mystery, Hollow Earth stuff.
Don't get me going on that.
we could spend all night talking that topic. That's our bread and butter.
Yeah, we love this stuff.
We're always involved in being approached by producers who think this is a great idea. It's time for something new, time for something authentic. Everybody's sick of the dumb shows of people running out of houses and screaming. They want something else. And then some big executive will come along, the head of the network, and say, "No, I want my ghosts to be ghosts, and my demons to be demons, and my aliens to be aliens." Da 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 da. So we get nowhere. But there are always, as Mr. Spock would say, there are always possibilities. So there's a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm getting up there in years. So whatever's going to happen, media-wise, I hope it happens quickly.
Yeah, I mean, a movie about the Dulce, New Mexico event that was explained by Philip, that would be a fantastic movie, and it kind of gets into that whole, ultra-terrestrial potential or underground bases or whatever the case may be. That would be I'd watch that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I think of that story. I mean, I don't know the people involved, and that's something. Because when they threw me out of the seminary for investigating this stuff in 1977, I ended up I was never ordained. People think I'm a former priest. I think the church and I both had a lucky escape. But I ended up in journalism by dumb luck. The only other thing I could do was write. And I shoehorned my way into the worst newspaper in New England, and they hired me. And I kind of made the best of that and took it from there. And I have had a great career in journalism since then. But anyway, dumb luck, I guess. But
no pun intended.
You ask, it prompts you to ask weird questions like this.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's since I've gotten so involved, especially since really doing the show, I've always been interested in the topic, especially of UFOs and extraterrestrials. But since I've gotten into the show about 2 years ago when I started. I find questioning everything and asking if there's a deeper meaning behind the most mundane things that most people would just not take a second thought about. I had a period of time 8 months ago where I was really struggling with a lot of things on the spiritual level, and I would find that I would ask a question and 3 buzzards would fly around me. And I established, some sort of a meaning to that. So then I would ask another question later or propose another theory, and 3 buzzards would fly by me. So it's just is it just 3 buzzards that happened to be flying around, or did I was it meant for me to see, or is it both? So yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'd be happy being circled by buzzards, but I get your point.
You might need to shower.
Synchronicities, as they say.
Right.
Which of course gets into the nature of reality, the hologram theory, things of this kind, which I think personally is the multiverse theory, just the other side of the coin. So, but meanings, the synchronicities, is there something behind controlling it? I mean, if it is a hologram, who's doing the projecting?
Yeah.
Is it God? I mean, what does God even mean? Is it he, she, it, or them? Or, what does alien mean? We're big on ours, so we have to define our terms.
Yep.
And that's not easy to do because we have a very narrow paradigm.
Well, and I think that if you were to ask people who predominantly investigate Bigfoot what they think of aliens, you're going to get one response. If you ask people who predominantly investigate ghosts what they think is alien, they're going to get a different response. So you're not going to get a universally applied definition for alien or any of that kind of stuff because, again, everybody's looking at it through their lens instead of the lens of this is all one big thing. We need to come together and define these things directly. And then that way, when we look at these things, we can all look at them with the same definition and see if they meet or fall outside of whatever that definition is.
Well, I think one thing that's hopeful, Josh and Stefan, is that, and I get this sort of from speaking at a lot of UFO conventions. Ben, my son, and I are invited to speak at a lot of them. I don't know why. It's not that really the center of our field, and we're only writing our first book on that subject. But we're well received there, and so is the idea of the crossover phenomena, as it's often known. UFO experts, such as Kathy Martin, years ago, would consult with us, and now and then, today too. She would have an abduction case, and all of a sudden, the people are having "quote unquote" demonic phenomena taking place in the what's the connection, or why would that occur? And so we kind of work on that. We're not invited so much to speak at paranormal conventions because I think we're bad for business. We question all their theories, and but there is, I think, a growing awareness, certainly in the UFO community, and there's a certain point in the paranormal community, in the ghost type people, that there is a certain crossover reality that's going on here. Much that we've talked about is becoming an acceptable subject, I think, at many of these conventions, just to one degree or another, and I think that's a hopeful sign.
Yeah, definitely starting, especially with us, the people we interview a lot of people. I mean, we just had Kathleen on as well, things like that. And we are starting to see more of it. I don't know if it's us psychically grabbing folks that relate to us or not, or we are starting to see more of the community finally starting to come together. Even some of these old established guys are finally starting to kind of break out
of the old part.
Right. Like one of our mentors and friends is Keith Age. He's the rock and roll ghost hunter, and he's a really good friend of ours, and he's been doing this for years and years and years. And even when we met him 2.5 years ago, like, he was pretty stone solid on things, just simply paranormal ghost things. But over the last few years, like the more conversations we have, the more I start to see him wondering about connections and things. It's interesting to see how everything is starting to change, things like Hellier, and then the stuff with the government UAP release and all of these different things. People are starting to question whether or not these are connected, and maybe it's all the reality shows that are out there and things like that. It's just a little more popular. I don't know, but I'm glad that we're finally starting to come together a tad bit more.
Yeah. I was on the air with Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters, whom I really don't know. He's from Rhode Island, too.
Yeah.
And they approached me in 2003 before they got famous and said, and I said, no, I don't really think the approach is good. But Jason and I were, I forget what show it was, and we were talking, and I was rather impressed with him.
Yeah,
I was surprised that I was. I expected, the garden variety dead people thing. But he seemed to come across as having an open mind, very articulate, and he was describing a case that they'd had in a hotel where the quote-unquote ghost was asking, were they from security? And I run into that time and time and time again. If you're open-minded to the idea, And I find that the ghosts we're investigating very often think we're ghosts haunting them.
Yes.
Because they see us in the same way we see them, across an electrically charged membrane of a paranormal reality. You're going to see a glowing figure or a shadow or something like that. And we run into that all the time. Now, had we not had this point of view, we wouldn't have picked up on that. We would have been maybe confused.
It's kind of like I relate it to this. So I've got a big picture window in my dining room area, and at nighttime, it's pitch black in my backyard. But if I've got just a little bit of light on in the kitchen, I see a reflection of myself in that window because, of course, it acts like a mirror.
Pretty scary stuff, huh?
Yeah, it is. But it's double paned, and so I see like an offset reflection of myself in that mirror, and that's kind of what I imagine we see of them and they see of us. It's like a shadowy, not really full on mirror reflection, but it's something there that you just can't explain. It's kind of fuzzy and it's offset. And one of the things that I thought about, this has been like 20 years ago, and I was thinking about was when you dream at night, do the kind of bubbles of our two universes kind of brush up against each other. And so when they do that, do you potentially dream your counterpart's life or your counterpart's dreams in that other kind of multiverse, as those universes are like bubbles floating through a cosmic goo, and they just kind of brush up against each other as they pass?
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I have a written dream record that I've kept for over 20 years.
That's fantastic.
And it's I go back to that. I look, and it comes right back to me. And I'll tell you how it got really weird that way. I was an editor, a night editor at the Providence Journal, which is the Metro Daily around here. And you put out the morning paper the night before, so it was a very long hours. So, and I'd come home 1, 2 in the morning. And then I'd get up early to take my sons to the school bus, because my wife was in the law business and had 9 to 5 hours she couldn't change. So I would nap in the afternoon in order to make up for the sleep. So I found that the pattern of broken sleep, I remembered far more dreams, and I always would write them down immediately. All right. So as I say, I have well over 20 years of these things. There are places, and I do believe they're places, parallel realities, where I have life memories. I know all the people. There is, for example, a cafe or little restaurant on the corner of some town in Pennsylvania where my wife and I frequently stop. This is all in dreams.
Yeah.
And there are, of course, parallel realities, and there are some that are so vivid. And for example, at one point I was I was here in New England. I was standing in front of a stone wall, and the gate into this garden I wanted to get into, I couldn't open it. So I said, okay, and at my age, maybe it's out of the book of Joel, old men will dream dreams and that sort of thing. I just decided most of my dreams are lucid. So I said, I'm going to fly over the wall. So I did that, and there were leaves coming off a maple tree, and I grabbed one. I felt that leaf. I felt its veins, and then I woke up, and I still felt that leaf was in my hand, and I was perfectly prepared to have it be there when I opened my hand, because it wasn't. So I think this is a whole fascinating world, and I think you're right, Josh, that we're experiencing, I think in some cases at least, parallel worlds.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like same thing. I've had not a recurring dream, but a continuing dream since I was a child. I mean, it has picked up the next chapter. I mean, for years and years and years, it always deals with vampires and werewolves and things like that.
So at least I have pleasant dreams.
Yeah, no, and they always evolve and things like that. And then I got into a phase in my life where I think things were going really well, and all of a sudden I became like a vampire hunter and kind of thing. But it always picked up. They always remember. And I would revisit locations, and I like schools and things like that I went to. They never look like the actual school I went to, but they look the same every time I go in my dreams. It's so crazy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And then just like you, one of my favorite books, he did the same thing, was Jack Kerouac has a book called Book of Dreams, where he cataloged his dreams for a really long extended period of time. And it's fascinating because you start to see parallels in all of his dreaming and things like that. And I'm like, man, I hope you publish yours one day, because I'll read it.
Well, one of the fascinating things, and I learned this in talking to Dr. Jeffrey Long, who's an expert in near-death experience. He's an MD, and we serve on the board of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute together. That's how I know him. And I was describing some of these to him, and I said, the vivid nature. I said, I really don't think I'd ever had a near-death experience, except once when I was in atrial fibrillation and had pneumonia and ended up in the hospital for 10 days. And I saw something I would never expect. I saw a lizard. I'm not big on reptiles, and most people aren't, but I mean, it was utterly beautiful. It was multicolored, and it was looking out of this cave and very benign. And he said, and the vivid nature of it was really strange. And he said that's a near-death experience characteristic, is a very, very vivid visions. I said, well, I'll go you one better. I have dreams like that. Sometimes when I'm awake as well, there will be something that will flash into my mind that I feel is from a parallel world, and it is more real than real. Utterly vivid, whether it be, landscape or people or whatever. And he's chewing on that one. We're going to have him on our show. We're going to talk about that. So, whether there's some relationship between crossing the membranes and certainly the death experience, I think or we don't even call it death. We call it translation. It's a very, very ancient theological term for the changing consciousness, if you will. So anyway, but that's something that's being looked into. Yeah, I mean,
I have had a couple of vivid dreams about. I mean, I just had one 2 nights ago that felt so amazingly real. I woke up and it was about had to do with my wife. So I woke up and made sure I wrote it down so that I could tell her about it, so she could decide what she wanted to do with the information that was passed along. But it felt like I was telling Stefan before the show started, it felt so. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt more like a conveyance of information. Almost like we want you to take this back with you type thing. I have only had a lucid dream one time in my life. I was a gangster. I was a police officer. I was down on a pier or like a dock or something, and I was trying to arrest these 2 guys, and they started shooting at me, and I realized it was a dream. I immediately then could fly, and I had double Uzis that I could shoot back at them. But I do have quite a few very vivid dreams that I wake up and remember every aspect of. It's just really interesting. You see yourself doing things that are not necessarily out of the realm of possibility. And you just wonder if that's, did my brain just invent that, or am I dreaming myself somewhere else?
You should keep a dream record too. It would be like a Tom Clancy novel.
I would love to, but 2 things. One, my handwriting is like chicken scratch. And 2, I write very vigorously, and when I do, my hand hurts after
audio record. That's
or that's what they have computers for, Josh.
Yeah, I know. But then I got to walk down to my computer, and turn it on. And but no, I thought about doing because I do have a little audio recorder. I could just do audio files and then transcribe them.
That's what I did for a long time, because same thing when I would wake up. And I have really good handwriting, but as soon as you wake up, you don't, because you're just trying to hurry up and write it down. Right. So I just started recording, and then I did it later. So it makes a big difference.
So I don't know. I wanted to ask the question, and I totally blinked on what it was that I was going to ask. Stefan, do you have...
Yeah, I was going to bring up, because I really wanted to talk about the work with your son, because to me, that's so rad and so cool. Like, as you said, he got into this with you when he was 13 or 14. I would have loved that, to get into that. And so I'm sure already, you being his dad, he's already found an interest and things like that. But, how's that been getting to work with your son all these years now?
It's a real blessing. Now, he has an older brother, and I got the idea at one point, in the late 90s. I mean, Ben was born in 92. That I wondered if blood relatives had similar or the same reactions to paranormal stimuli, as it were.
Yeah, we talk about that for sure.
Yeah, and the first experiment was with a cousin, and there was a library, a little country library in Abington, Connecticut, where they were having the spontaneous manifestation of water on the cellar stairs. I mean, there was no leak. No pipes anywhere near it, in the middle of a dry summer, and all this water is dripping off these stairs, and they never rotted, the stairs. And I brought my cousin Marshall from Connecticut, who was a carpenter, had some carpentry experience, and we did have the same kind of stimuli, and he's worked with us on a couple of cases, but I kind of cast my eyes toward my son, and my older son Jonathan was interested, but he started sleeping with the light on, and I said, no, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
But Ben was 8 years younger. In 2005, I brought him on 2 cases after discussing very seriously with his mom whether we should do this. But they sat through 200 of my lectures, the 2 of them, selling books in the back of the room, and they knew all this, and Ben was totally at home with it. So one of our first cases was, of course, the Connecticut flap area, and I have pictures of him as a little kid, not a little kid, but 13, with our first video camera. People get a big charge out of that. And the other case was the haunted policeman of Vermont, as we called it. And we got out of that car in this rural Vermont area, and we didn't even have to talk to one another. We were drawn to this one tree where we felt something was going on, something very negative in a parallel world, 2 men fighting, actually, and whatever, future, past, I don't know. But there was a parasite, what I would have thought years ago was a demon, quote unquote, folklore calls them demons, feeding upon this. And it would, when it couldn't get enough to eat from that, it would go into the house and start bothering the people. Now the police officer said, it's funny you should describe it like that, because whenever my fiance and I have a fight, and apparently they had some Olympic style fights, they would this thing would come into the apartment and start knocking things off shelves, and they'd actually see it, this big huge shadow thing walking around. And Ben actually got a picture of it, and it's in one of our books, and with the guy's father standing in front of it. And I was afraid to show Ben the picture. I said, he's going to really freak him out. But he was really cool with it. He said it looks just like a Black Rider from Lord of the Rings, and he thought that was great. So he's been a natural ever since. I would have him by my side anytime. Now he's going to be 30 next year. And people actually heard him grow up on the air. He started on the air with me when he was 16, and he was the youngest syndicated broadcaster in America when we were on CBS in 4 cities. So I'm really proud to be working with him. He's very different. He has some different gifts, but people write to us from all over the world, saying, gee, I wish I had something in common with my son, anything.
Yeah.
Stanton Friedman once turned to us and said, I envy you, to Ben. And he said, I envy you, to me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would love to have be working with their sons like that. So I feel I'm really blessed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I found out a lot of stuff about my dad, who had a very early interest in paranormal things, but he never talked about it. There were a number of reasons, but my grandmother and my aunt were both really big into spiritualism and the New Age movement and different things like this. My great aunt is who I met. My great aunt and my grandmother, they were sisters, and my great aunt was a high priest of a coven out in California. I mean, all kinds of cool stuff that I didn't find out till years later. Well, so my dad would always go to these these conventions and things like that, or these meetings and all this stuff with them. And he was really big into automatic writing and astral travel and transcendental meditation and all this stuff. This was the 60s, and I guess I found out, and he finally told me that what freaked him out is he had learned how to astral travel from this yogi, and he was going to try it. So him and his buddy had just moved, Dad had just moved to a new house, and him and his buddy were going to go to each other's house. That was their plan. And Dad, something about Dad went there, but he went there, and Dad couldn't explain anything what he saw, so he wasn't sure if he was there. But this kid explained exactly what Dad's room looked like. He had never been there, and all kinds of stuff like that, and it freaked him out so much that he walked away from it. He went back and looked at all of his automatic writings, and all of a sudden he was finding connections and what we would call synchronicities now. And being the Catholic, it freaked him out, and he just threw everything away and walked away from it and wouldn't ever talk about it. It's only been now within the last 2 or 3 years, because I have this show that he's starting to open up about some of that. I'm like, man, this would have been so cool if you would have.
Oh, you're lucky you still have it. Well, my father was fascinated by the unexplained. Now, he didn't have the exotic connections your father did.
Yeah.
But he was a cousin of H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know if he knew it, and they corresponded, according to my mother, in the 1920s and 30s. And because my mother threw all the letters out. I mean, I could have anyway. But he was fascinated. But that's where I got my love of the unexplained, was really from his interest. He had a gigantic scrapbook of how the world might end, and the floods or dry up, and but not the most pleasant reading for a kid. But I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And so I think that we do inherit these things from.
And I look back and I see now, because I was always interested in the occult, supernatural, all this different stuff. And he would always try to discourage it, and not in a "you're going to hell" kind of way. It was always just, you don't want the, and now
that's the best way to encourage it.
Oh, and that's exactly what it did. I mean, and then of course, when I found out from my great aunt's daughter about some of those things, oh man, I hit my grandmother up, and she's like, your dad didn't want me talking about it. She had a spirit guy. I mean, all kinds of stuff, and it just fed me.
Yeah. Well,
I have no history like that. No history like that for me. I'm the first generation, I guess. So.
Southern Baptist. That's why Catholics, we act like we aren't into paranormal, spooky stuff, But there are a lot more Catholics interested in stuff, because Catholicism is really pretty supernatural at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, well, people in all religions seem to, they kind of approach it in their own ways. So including Catholics.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's why to this day I'm just I'm a big horror movie fan, and I really love demon things or exorcism things, anything that has to do with I love it, just because that's the stuff that scared me when I was a kid. So
I never remembered the question I was going to ask, but you said something and it prompted another question. So you were talking about just a few minutes ago doing talking about the parasite that was feeding off of the two guys fighting, and then we go into the house and feed off of the conflict in there. One of the things that I've thought about a couple years ago, Stefan has night hags quite a bit. And then he has a friend that used to be on the show that has night hags quite a bit. And one of the things that I thought about is are night hags some sort of an entity that feeds off of the fear that is generated from you being in sleep paralysis and kind of halfway coming awake and seeing them in your room, and then you get afraid, and so they feed off of that kind of fear energy that is produced. And then you talked about this parasite, and it made me think maybe that's commonality there. So
yeah, I think that's pretty much barking up the right tree. In my opinion, these parasites, there are about 9 different species of them that I've identified over the years. I think they operate in different ways. They seem to have a culture. They seem to be living life forms. I've had physical encounters with them, including one in that Bridgeport case of 74. And that smashed my belief system, because these things were supposed to be demons, which by definition would be spirits. And they called into question the whole idea of spirits to me, at least in the laws of physics as they are. So yeah, I think you're pretty much on the right track there, Josh. They can't. There are often parasites that we've seen in cases that will take very benign forms. For example, in a 1990s case we had in Rhode Island here, there would be two parasites, and one they seem to move from one person in the family to the other. In most cases, and I call them farmers. These kinds, and they will literally farm a family sometimes for generations. And in this case, the people would see a little blonde girl with flowers in her hair. Now, what could be more benign than that? And it turned out it was a parasite. They push buttons. They'll get. They're very good at this. They're nature's mimics, among nature's mimics. So yeah, I think it's the first day of school when it comes to quote unquote demons.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, I always think about, and we've talked about this before too, Josh. I mean, usually after a night of a night hag visitation, I am definitely mentally drained. My anxiety and depression stuff is really kicking in. I'm moody. My buttons are easily pushed and things like that. And it's very interesting for sure. And
I think it's interesting too that the last couple of times, because I've been putting this thought into your head that maybe, you shouldn't fear them. And so the last couple of times that you've been able to interact with them and ask them about it, the response has been, no, you should definitely fear us, but obviously in a more creepy way. So if the intent is to solicit fear energy from you, then that would be why they want you to fear them. So
yeah, exactly. I think that's essentially how it works. There was one case, it was in Indiana, where we had a parasite victim, as we would put it, who said that the parasite was expressing sorrow for the way it had to live, and that it had to pick on him. Now I don't know if I'd buy that on its face.
Interesting.
But I have heard of that once or twice in one of my own cases that supposedly happened. Now, does that mean these things are, former humans or some kind of mutants or something? I mean, possibly, but I've never seen really any humanity in these things. In the Bridgeport case of 74, on the Monday night of that case, the Warrens had left to do some TV interview, and I was alone with the family, and we were attacked by the four entities. I felt there were four entities the minute I walked into that house, and you could almost see them. And this is when I had this physical encounter, and they came across, and the best word I can use is utterly alien. These were aliens, and I'm not saying from some other planet necessarily or like that, but there was just no humanity there, completely other, totally uncaring, and very intelligent, and hostile and hungry.
Hostile and hungry, yeah.
Maybe that's where the Wendigo comes into play. It's not really feeding on human flesh; it's feeding on human energy.
Yeah. Well, the labels we put on these things maybe depend on our culture.
Right.
But I remember, the whole Mothman thing, and I remember being a kid in the early 60s, and my mother would show me pictures from and stories from the Hartford Courant, wire stories about the giant bird they were seeing in West Virginia, right? And, today I talked to some of the surviving witnesses, and I kind of come full circle, but there were all sorts of negative things that happened during that case. So when you have what Keel would call a window area, or we would say a flap area, intersect point, overwash, anything can come and go. Whether it be UFOs, Bigfoot, parasites, and it depends on who's ringing the dinner bell and for what.
Yeah, when we were talking with Kathleen Martin, I think we were talking about the possibility that when these, if it is a physical UFO that enters our plane of existence, that when it does so and it produces a lot of electromagnetic energy, does that electromagnetic energy also open the doorway for other things to come and go? And so that's when you have those flap or window locations and you see a lot of UFO sightings, is it more of a UFO sightings allow or enable the other things to come through as well?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in May of 19, we were on one of our expeditions to the Pennsylvania Triangle, as we call it, which is a, outside of Skinwalker Ranch, is a very hopping kind of place. We were sitting there at night, and we usually will stake out certain areas, but in this case, we were, Shane Searway thought we should skywatch. And we had Shane Searway, and we had Alexander Petikoff, the filmmaker. There was myself, and Chuck Credo from Maine, Seacoast Saucers of New England. And Mark D'Antonio from MUFON was supposed to be there, but he couldn't make it, and he'll suffer terrible anguish for the rest of his life because he didn't see what we saw. There was something in the sky. I happened to have my brand new Bestgarder 300 binoculars with infrared. Never used them before, and the bloody thing paid for itself right then and there. They got almost 3 minutes of this thing moving through the sky. It looked like a crystal clear sky, cloud thing with an object coming out of it and going back into it. And it was darker than dark below it. And it looked for all the world like an artist's conception of an astronomical, whether it be a black hole or a white hole, with things coming in. Yeah. And that area is full of intersect points. I myself had a Bigfoot encounter there. Everybody, we have neighborhood meetings with 30, 35 people. They've all seen weird lights in Bigfoot. And I'm wondering if this was not an intersect point.
Well, I'm thinking, I need to get some of these locations from you so that I can lay them on my Google Earth map and see what else is recorded on there or happening around that area. So, yeah. Well,
if you want to see that video, it's the Facebook page of our show, Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and it's one of two pretty remarkable videos there, but it's available for anybody to.
Definitely going to check that out. Well, we want to be cognizant of your time, Paul, and so we wanted to get out of here, but we do I of course gotta blow up Behind the Paranormal. It's absolutely fantastic, and they can go to behindtheparanormal.com, find you and your son's books, all kinds of really great stuff on there. I mean, my goodness, sir, thank you so much for taking your time and spending that with us tonight.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Great.
I did want to ask, is there a book that you've read recently or are reading now that you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh, by me or someone else?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's Messengers of Deception by Jacques Vallée, whom I'm just getting to know. And real inspiration to me as a kid. And very fascinating stuff about how UFOs can be used to control people. Not that they're not real, but how, various groups can use it to influence spirituality and to take away personal responsibility. Very, very interesting approach. And he wrote it in 1979. And I think it's still very valuable. Yeah, Messengers of Deception by Dr. Jacques Vallée.
Definitely check it out.
Yeah, I love Vallée. Definitely one of my heroes as well.
Wonderful guy. Yeah.
Yep.
Very, very cool.
Okay.
Again, though, thank you so much, sir. You are welcome on here anytime, and we will be shoving down people's throats all of your stuff because it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. As I say, a real pleasure, fellas.
Another great big thank you to Paul Eno. Like I said, I'm dumbfounded. Like, still, just my favorite conversations where I literally have to say we have to stop because of time.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the conversations that I chalk up there with, like, when we had the conversation with Tyler from Hellier, and with Kathleen and
Andrea Perrin,
Ralph, and Andrea. I mean, it's just another fantastic conversation that really, again, it's an opportunity for us to express our opinions and theories and to hear them kind of responded back in a positive way, and also to just open our minds to other possibilities that we may not have considered, like the whole idea around the whole carriage thing, and are we interacting with time somehow?
I mean, those are that's something I've loosely thought about, but now that it's been brought to the surface, I'm like, well, I already know that that's about to insert itself deeper into the screen.
And I mean, I know that this weekend I'm going to be watching a lot of YouTube videos about what is quantum mechanics, because it's like the third time that it's come up in a conversation.
Just quantum mechanics, quantum physics, quantum computing. I'm just like, it's around the corner, and it is definitely something I think that may end up explaining a lot of things, but don't want to drag this out. But again, thank you, Paul Eno, behindtheparanormal.com. Check out there. Make sure to listen to his radio show and just read those books. What a fascinating individual. Just a reminder before we get to our encounter of the FearScape, to hopefully, we get you guys to join our Patreon, become a significant blanket hugger. Patreon.com/FearScapePod or FearScapePodcast.com/support. There you can join our Patreon. We've got some behind the scene things coming in the future, some really neat stuff. Of course, Wristwatch is a part of that. There has been some amazing things happening with Terry. He even yelled at us recently.
We got cool. Yelled at. That was awesome. So
because we're not jumping on checking out these window areas, so to speak. If
you all would subscribe to our Patreon, we would have money to book flights and go do all that kind of stuff for Terry. So help us out.
Because we want to go really bad, and we don't want Terry to yell at us anymore.
So
the man claiming to be Terry Rist. But some really interesting things has happened there with multi-dimensional theories of some things that we've been working with Alan Greenfield on as well, connecting us with the man claiming to be Terry Rist, who Alan and Olav are both almost 99% certain that we are speaking to Terry Rist. And so there has been some pretty interesting things out there, some questions that Olav and Alan have asked that only they know the answers to, and answers have been given. So
really, even if you've never seen the docuseries Hellier and you have no plan to watch the docuseries Hellier, the stuff that we are being given, and the leads that we are being given, and the rabbit holes that we are going down, is still very interesting. And I would encourage you to maybe even just check out Wristwatch for 1 month and just see if it contains information that you find interesting. Because again, you may not have had any exposure before to Terry Rist, may not know who he is, may not know who Alan Greenfield is, may not know what Hellier is, but the information that's being provided and the leads that it's given is just still very
astounding.
Interesting.
We're getting into, just like we talked about on the show today, deep underground military bases. We're getting into old deep space programs, just
stuff going back to before NASA was founded.
Mystery stuff. There is just some fascinating things. And we found some proof to a lot of stuff that has been given to us, and we are anxious to get out and look for some more, and more is coming. And it's just fascinating. And again, I don't want to dwell on Terry stuff, Wristwatch, but it's cool.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of cool stuff happening. And it's crazy when you have things that, come through on a Ouija board, and then you get an email from the man claiming to be Terry Rist that echoes those things that came through on a Ouija board.
Like we were talking about how things are very connected. And just all kinds of crazy stuff. But, of course, there are other tiers as well. Just for blanket huggers that have nothing to do with Wristwatch, or you can join the big tier and you get everything.
Right.
But we are giving away free, stuff as well with different tiers. And I'm just really excited about the people that have joined so far. And we just thank you guys so much. We can't do this without you.
Yep.
But now that has been said, Josh, I want to get to encounters from the FearScape.
Encounters from the FearScape.
So this week's encounter from the FearScape, it comes from a listener who didn't even want to tell us their state. This is another one of those that gets nervous about folks knowing if it's them. But this comes from a listener named Robin, is a United States citizen here, and just take a listen to this story.
In 1990, I was about 4 months pregnant. My husband and I were living in a house that his aunt died in and left to my husband. So one night, we went to bed together, and I decided to put a nightlight in the bathroom so that I could see in case I had to use the bathroom during the night. I was laying in bed, trying to fall asleep, but I had a feeling like I did when I was a kid, like something was in the closet or underneath my bed. I kept thinking, okay, this is stupid. There's nothing wrong, just go to sleep, Robin. But the feeling persisted to the point that I was about to wake up my husband and tell him. Before I could say a word, he grabs my hand and said,
"Don't say a word. Someone is in this room."
Well, I started panicking. I whispered, "Who?" He said,
"Look at the foot of the bed."
The door to the bathroom was next to the foot of the bed, and the nightlight was on, so the light illuminated that space. I looked, and I didn't see anything. But my husband swore that he did, and he said that it was moving around to his side. By this time, I was shaking. I was so scared. And he said,
"It's right here. It's right next to me."
He stared at where it was and then turned to me and said,
"It's my aunt."
He slept that night, but I did not. I was petrified. It was so hard living in that house after that, even though I knew that his aunt was a really nice lady. The house would get cold whenever we would argue, and every now and then we would hear a door slam shut. However, when my baby was born, it did get better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, interesting that the husband was freaked out until he realized that it was familiar. And thinking about the conversation we just had with Paul.
I know. And I've had this picked for a solid week and a half ready to go.
You know, was that some sort of a parasite, and it just showed itself as the husband's aunt in order to continue to be there?
Especially, I mean, the cold spots.
Yeah, the cold spots
definitely means an energy drain.
Yeah.
You know, she's got more stories. She tried to consolidate it all into one paragraph here. Just absolutely fascinating, man.
Well, and again, just, you know, hearing that story after the conversation with Paul produced a completely different thought process. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, this show is gonna. I'm interested to see what kind of dreams I have tonight, and what thoughts and theories I have the next couple of weeks. So, wow.
Ooh, man. Well, that's our listener story, our encounter from the FearScape there. You can always send in yours to us. You can send those to fearscapepodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on any of our social medias, hit us up on any of the message boards that we're on, or you can join our media network. You know, we run the FearScape Media Network full of other great podcasts. Well, we have a Facebook group, if you're on Facebook, the FearScape Media Network fan group, which is really great. We just celebrated our year anniversary. We have over 2,000 members on there with that fan group, and it has been amazing. But it's another great place. People share their stories on there all the time. It's one of those places you can do that as well.
FearScapePodcast.com, click report a sighting. That's another way you can do it.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be ghosts. It can be anything: aliens, Bigfoot, your mom having creepy red eyes. I don't care. All of that.
And Aunt Betsy, whatever the case may be.
You can't trust Aunt Betsy, man. That's all I'm saying. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, as you do every week, and supporting us. We love you guys so much. And even when, you know, I get sick or Josh gets sick or we have to take a week off, you guys are always so very excited about us coming back after a week. And we always love those little notes of encouragement. And we thank you guys so much. But we are going to get out of here and let you guys get back to your day or your night or whatever it may be. You like that voice?
I do.
For you.
That's fantastic.
But anyways, again, thank you guys so much for tuning in to FearScape Paranormal Podcast here on the FearScape Media Network. This has been Stefan keep your eyes to the skies.
This has been Josh. The truth is now.
And remember, folks, hold those blankets extra tight because things tend to get spooky when you're listening to FearScape. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We hope you have enjoyed this guidepost on the road of high strangeness with us. And we thank you, as always, for listening and joining our caravan to the weird and unknown. Please consider supporting us as we continue our journey to find the answers we all seek. FearScapePodcast.com/support.